Дальше. Организация работы с научными и природоохранными организациями на международных и трансграничных проектах. Лучшие практики. Анетте, вам слово, пожалуйста.
Добрый день, мне очень огромная честь быть здесь. Особенно спасибо организаторам за приглашение. Мне русский не родной, поэтому извините меня за ошибки и, можно сказать, забывать какие-то термины. Я все-таки, наверное, дам презентацию на английском, но я очень старалась вам подготовить слайды на русском языке. Я надеюсь, что мы друг друга хорошо поймем, и обязательно обращайтесь ко мне на русском языке. Я еще учусь, я думаю, что мы вместе научимся. Что есть процесс, о котором я бы хотела вам рассказать? Это действительно долгий процесс совместной работы, и как научиться вместе работать, и как лучше это сделать уже 15 лет. So I'll go back to English. You'll have slides in Russian as well, so I'll try to manage the technical part of this here. So I was asked to tell you some examples of international and transnational projects where cooperation is really the key with scientific organizations, with business, with creditors, with NGOs, with all affected parties really. And IUCN has developed special tools for this for this case, and one of those is independent scientific and technical advisory panels. Okay. And they're really a very valuable tool for resolving some very controversial conservation and development issues. The essence of these panels is that they really link all relevant stakeholders, from NGOs, from independent scientists, from government, private sector, financial sector. And the idea is that they provide robust, impartial, scientific and technical advice in a very transparent manner. One of the examples that we have in the Russian level, working already 15 years together with Sakhalin Energy and other actors, is Western Gravel Advisory Panel. Besides Western Gravel Advisory Panel, IUCN also has convened or currently convenes a number of other panels that address different issues in different parts of the world. They include Rio Doce panel in Brazil, which was launched quite recently, to really look at social and environmental remediation in the watershed of Rio Doce after the collapse of the dam. Or there's also been a panel in Niger Delta, which was looking at remediation and rehabilitation of biodiversity after oil spills. So let me zoom in the Sakhalin and tell you a little bit more about this example. Sakhalin is a very special place because it's really the home of very endangered species of whale. It's actually listed as endangered on IUCN Red List and included also in Russian Red Book. And the beauty of this, as many people have given the examples here, it's actually the indicator species of the health of the Sakhalin shelf. And here you have a very special place that is nowhere else in the world, so you have a great opportunity to do something about it. Since 2014, so already 15 years, IUCN convenes scientific panel, with independent scientists both from the Russian and international level. And the heart of it is to provide advice to Sakhalin Energy and other actors on how the company can minimize risks associated with its operations on the species and the habitat. And the panel issues scientific, technical, and operational recommendations to the company and other affected parties and actors on the conservation recovery of this whale population. And as I mentioned before, transparency is very important, and that's really the heart of this process, is that all recommendations that panel has issued are publicly available, and the company has responded to all of the recommendations, explaining and indicating how they have implemented them, and if they have not, why. And as I mentioned, because it's publicly available, we are very pleased to learn that there are some other companies who are very interested in this advice and they do follow, such as Gazprom Neft, for example. And they have attended some of the meetings and expressed interest in those recommendations. So it's free to learn from this. So how do the recommendations are developed? They are based upon best scientific methods, data and information available at the time, Because obviously we can't know everything. That's why monitoring, that was mentioned many times here, is very essential. And the information and data that is available at the time to the panel, they aim to ensure, when they develop recommendations, they aim to ensure the conservation and recovery of the whales, but also recognize the needs of the company. And there are a number of topics in this particular case that the panel is looking on in terms of their recommendations, and some of them include the annual population assessment, which is really the checkpoint to see whether you are doing well or not, so how the species is doing, the research methods, the monitoring methodology, some of the other specific topics like noise and ship strikes and others. So how can you really make this process work of the production of recommendations? Is that the panel's work is made thanks to the panel's work is made possible thanks to the data collected, which is extremely important. And it's a regular annual data being collected by joint program of industry partners there, Sakhalin Energy, Exxon, Neftegas Limited, and now also Gazprom Neft. And also the NGOs sponsor programs on Russia gravel projects and also other information. And here I would like to reiterate what many colleagues said here today, that monitoring and consistent and regular monitoring is really key to assess any impact on the western grey whales, or any species for that matter, and the effectiveness of your programs, and the measures which have been set against specific objectives, specific targets, and most importantly, baselines. And baselines are very important here because before the start of any operation, it's very important to collect information on what is the state of the ecosystem and state of the species, so that you can later assess how it has reacted to certain measures that you have taken in place. So in this regard, we actually spent the last week here in Moscow, together with the panel, with a number of scientists, the company, and also NGOs, to really look at the various progress on monitoring and research on the species. And here I'd like to bring you some of the conclusions from the meeting, which really relate on the importance of the monitoring and how they really relate back to the management. And here some of the conclusions that the panel would like to share is, and it also applies to any other situation really, which is based on the learnings from 15 years of work in this particular case, is that it's very important for everyone to work together, regulators and the companies and everyone else, to establish and maintain consistent time series of data that would then help you to support the long-term assessments of biological and ecological patterns and trends. And then what is also important is because, of course, over 15 years, technologies have also changed, also for research, for example. And it's important that innovative collection methods for data is really compatible with previously used methodology, so that you can actually compare these results and maintain the integrity of the analysis. What is also important is to make full use of data that you have, so that you can adjust and update the different dynamic patterns to ensure that the mitigation methods are still appropriate, they still make sense, and they are still adequate. And what is also important is to ensure, as I mentioned again, is to ensure regular annual monitoring of all the components, so that you have the consistent series of data. And then, where appropriate, you have great opportunity to combine efforts with other actors in the area to really collaborate for impact, and to make sure that those who work in the same area can collaborate on joint programs, on joint catalogs of species, for example. And this is really something that, is quite essential for the common effectiveness, really. And one of the last points I'd like to raise is something that has already been mentioned a couple of times here. Addressing cumulative effects is really very important, because we do not operate in a vacuum, we really operate in ecosystem. And the various decisions and things that we make and the measures we implement do have an impact, not only within the different company and different measures that you make, but also the broader ecosystem, different sectors and different companies that work in the same area and have potentially negative impact on the same species using the same area. So here I'd like to say that we really believe that advice to Sakhalin Energy and other actors would benefit from a full assessment of cumulative effects of all activities on the Western Grey Wells, be it oil and gas, be it fisheries, be it tourism, be it others. But the heart of it again goes back to data, because full and complete assessment can only be possible if there is more data and information available from other actors and sectors, all having potential impacts on the whales. And that will only enable the development of a proper model to assess cumulative impacts. But again, managing those cumulative impacts going forward, this is not where the work stops, right? Just assessment. So it really, the integrated approach going forward to address those cumulative impacts would be very essential. And again, measures for the conservation of the whales would again potentially lead to conservation outcomes of the system level, then creating the benefits for the species, for other species using the same area of the Sea of Okhotsk. So here we do have a great opportunity, really, and most importantly, we have hope. So we should not underestimate that. And I invite everyone to work together on this. And I'm very, very proud of this example, and we're very pleased to work with Sakhalin Energy and other actors on this project, which has really been a crown jewel of IUCN panels, and has inspired others, as I mentioned. Thank you.
Спасибо большое. Самое главное, да, что у нас как международные организации следят тоже за нашей деятельностью.